story just before the break of the war.
To może pani mi przypomnie, w którym miejscu, jak i co?
Before you got on the train to Lvov on the 31st of August 2019.
Before?
Yes. Because really that is the beginning of the war for you, isn't it?
Of course, that's the beginning and the end of my childhood.
Yes.
Beginning and the end of my happy childhood. That is it, the 31st of August 1939.
Tell me about this journey. I know it was just you, your mom, and your brother.
Yes.
Not your father. Is it because of work that he didn't come with you?
No, because even then, nobody anticipated that the war was that little bit in front of us. We knew it was coming. Everybody knew the war, people escaping, people going east, people, but it was going to be that same night. Nobody. So my father, because he put us on the train as we stood, like this. Yeah. My mother had a
handbag.
A handbag. That's all she had. I don't think she even took any food with her. There was no way of getting onto the train because the train was so full that to get into it was a miracle. My father put my little brother through the little opening the window up on top of put the child in because people were hanging outside on top of the train, not like in Poland. Oh, who's that now?
That's not me.
Not me either. Okay, przepraszam.
Proszę bardzo.
Wiem, że nie zamawiałam nikogo.
So how did you
So we were as we stood, right? So my father was saying through the window, not to worry, I'll do everything, I'll prepare, I'll do, and send things via an agency or whatever, speditorem, via an agency, I'll send things to Lvov, and I'll see you in 2 days' time. And when he got home, there were call-up papers waiting for him. Even though he was category C, which is a low category, even though there were call-up papers for him. A category C because he had a problem with the knee since a young man, and so because of that, obviously, he was not in the first. And we had no idea because there was no communication anymore.
Why do you think he decided to put you on the train on the 31st of August? If you said that everybody was expecting
I don't know. He was going to send us off to Lvov. And obviously, it wasn't a question that I'm going to do it on the 31st.
Yes.
That was it. It was, the war was in the air. It was any minute, any moment. But nobody expected it immediately there and then this minute, that day. If he could say, I'll see you in 2 days' time.
Yes.
Which, of course, he didn't. And we had no idea what happened to him. The Germans bombed Lvov at night, or very early morning, 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. And they were bombing, and they bombed the station, of course, and the soldiers, soldiers lying there, all that. Pretty terrible. That was immediately done, and he was called up to the army. And he fought at Kielce, I believe, until the army was disbanded. And there were just a few of them, 5, 6 of them left from the whole, was it regiment or was it whatever, division or I don't know. And he made his way on foot afterwards from there to Lvov. But that took a long, long time until by the time he got to Lvov, the Soviet army and it took it. So we were under occupation already.
So he walked.
He
300,
walked.
over 300
Whatever
kilometers.
it was, I don't know
Yeah,
how
I
many
checked.
kilometers, but he
200
walked
miles. Yeah.
almost barefoot, because when he came, he looked. We didn't recognize him. We didn't know who he was.
What did he look like?
Absolutely terrible, with a beard, with a dark beard, and disheveled, barefoot. I can't tell you. We didn't know who was standing in the door. And as such, we had no idea what happened to him. We didn't know that he was at the front. We had no idea. That was it. I'll see you in 2 days' time. And silence.
Tell me about the journey itself, how you experienced this as a child. How much were you aware of, actually?
I was. I was aware of the fact, because everyone around the hall talked about nothing else. War. What did I know about the war? But that there was going to be war. That's all I knew. And we were, at the time, on holiday. We were near Bielsko-Biała, in Podlesie, on holiday, and my father cut it shorter because of the imminent war. So we came to Krakow about 10 days before we were supposed to. So that was my awareness of what was going on. And I knew it wasn't going to be fun. But that was it. What else? And they were talking and discussing, and people were coming, and they were sitting and planning. But people planned, and you planned this, and then suddenly we were those who, the men mostly, were taken to the army. Probably many went like we did, east. Whether to Lvov, not to Lvov, but east, away, as far as possible, away Ciechocinek, that way towards Romania. I mean, people were escaping, and so it was havoc. Absolutely havoc, but what did I feel? I don't know. I felt things are not good. That's all. I don't know whether I felt fear or whether I was in any way afraid. I don't think so. But I certainly was aware that this is it. We may go, maybe we'll come back, maybe we won't come back. I was thinking, but that's about it. And then they decided that we were going to, my mother decided that since she had her parents in Lvov, which was more than many people, because many had nobody there, they just were going like this and walking and hoping for the best. So we had where to go.
Yes.
And to who to go. That was in hindsight, to me, it was an enormous plus. And so they decided that my father was going to send us off first, and he was going to do the things, prepare them, and send it so that because as we stood, that's how we were. But that never came. Everything stayed behind. That's it. And I never never saw my hometown, my house, my home again until 55 years later, by chance.
Tell me the story about the soldiers when you got to Lvov to the station.
Lying,
What you
sleeping, one next to another. The journey was, of course, much, much longer than normal because he stopped. Normally, when we'd go to Lvov, every single year, as I told you, for Passover, that was a fast train. All right? So the first stop, I believe, was Przemyśl. It stopped there, and then I'm not sure whether he stopped between Przemyśl and Lvov anymore, but it was 1 or 2 stops, and that was it. This time he stopped, the train stopped at every village. Every little village train stopped, took more people. They were hanging, attached to one another, not even to the train anymore. It was unbelievable. The squeeze in the compartment where we were, I can't even imagine how it was that my mother had a seat. And by the time we reached Przemyśl, it was like before. The family, immediately the family were there to feed us. And true, because we had absolutely nothing with us to eat. So they were standing there, but except that this time it was no fun anymore. It was havoc, absolute havoc. People were getting out of the train, into the train. This, the noise, the shouting, the screaming. I mean, not screaming, but talking across each other and so on, so on. It was a pandemonium, in a way, and so from then on, by the time we reached Lvov, was about 10 o'clock in the evening, which would have been about 10 to 11 hours journey, not anything remotely like before. So, but as it was still summer, it was
August.
End of August. So it wasn't dark. It was still, it wasn't sunny, but it wasn't an evening yet. It was sort of semi. But these soldiers were lying there, which something I never saw before, and they were lying one next to another, sleeping. And it was very difficult to get out of the train because there was no way onto the platform. You had to almost step on them or wake them up. That I remember so vividly. It was a very sad sight, very sad sight. And my grandfather was waiting for us and so on. And we were bombed that same night. They bombed, I remember, the church, the Świętej Elżbiety, St. Elizabeth's Church. It was bombed, and what else I can't tell, but the station. I think that was the first thing that they bombed. It was the station. But of course, these poor soldiers, so many of them perished. And to me, that was so horrible to think, because I saw them there lying, sleeping. And so it stayed with me.
So were they actually Polish soldiers that
were
called up
they
just
were
like your father?
called up, yes, they were called up like my father, in uniforms, of course. And obviously, they were going to be, sent off the following morning. That was, they might have been sleeping for the night, like this. And on the station, obviously, to go places wherever they were going to be sent, or
is that how it was explained to you then? Because I'm
no,
sure you
nothing
asked.
was explained to me. No, nothing. I can't remember anybody explaining anything to me. Who would have the time to even talk about to a child? But no, this is stayed in my memory like this. Of course, and it was terrible because so many of them perished. All of them, or so many of them. when they bombed, and these soldiers lying sleeping. That's what happened. The amazing thing was also, which we weren't aware of it at all, that a bomb where my grandparents lived, opposite, like from here to there, opposite, was the main gas station or whatever, providing gas for the whole city. So whatever it was, the complete complex for gas. And apparently we learned many, many years later that a bomb fell there but did not explode. And they found it when they were doing some work there. Workmen found an unexploded bomb opposite the house of my grandparents. Now imagine if that bomb had exploded, the whole city would have been gassed.
Yes, and that would be
gas
a
station.
huge
It wasn't
explosion.
just the station; it was a whole huge, like a tower, whatever it was. Can you imagine that? It did not explode. So you can talk about all sorts of great miracles,
Yes.
which are inexplicable. You cannot logically explain any of it.
Fate.
I mean,
Meant to be.
you can call
Or
it
luck.
that, you can call it fate, you can call it coincidence, you can call it anything, but you can call it miracle, people call it all sorts of things. But it certainly was not something that you, as a writer or a script writer, could have been sitting for a week or 2 or a year, would not have had the idea that that sort of thing could have happened.
Yeah, it kind
and
of.
one's survival that way.
It's even, in a way,
Impossible.
more unexpected than anything you could come up in fiction.
You couldn't come up in fiction with it. You couldn't. Because it's so inexplicable. When you think of how is that possible? How is it possible that so... No, it's not on, it's not, but it was. But that's how it was.
So you, your mom, and your brother,
Yeah.
you made it to Lvov just before
Yeah.
the war broke out, and you're staying with your grandparents. And then about a month later or so, your father finally.
Much more than a month. He came. The Russians were already here.
Yes.
The Russians were in Lvov. I would have thought at least 2 to 3 weeks by the time he came.
Okay, so it must have been closer to
October
than end of
something.
September.
End of September, October. Yes.
And what was your life like? Life in Lvov after that, when your father joined you?
Terrible. Because of the condition he was in. My father was young. He was in his 30s then. He was young, and the way he was until then, young, very good looking, full of life, sportsman, all that sort of thing, full of life was my father. Here comes a man who is broken, completely broken. And to that extent that he had nightmares at night. And he was, talking and shouting in sleep and all sorts of things like that. Which were...
Just checking. No, we're good. Sorry.
Which were absolutely horrendous. He was saying things from what he saw on the front. And the way he looked, his looks changed. It was sort of a wild look about him. It wasn't the same person. So to me, it was really heartbreaking. and to my mother, of course, probably to all of us, and my grandparents too. And to that extent, and on top of that, he fought in the Polish Bolshevik War in the 1920, 1820. And since then, he had an absolute abhorrent hatred for Bolshevism, for the Bolsheviks. He didn't trust them an iota. He had this, it was like in him, anything but they. And here we are, occupied by. So to that extent was that a tragedy for him that his nervous system gave way, and he developed very acute pains, which the doctors assessed that this is connected or interconnected, and he had like sciatic and so on, which made him an invalid almost. And to me, my father, an invalid, it was terrible. And the pains were excruciating. And it wasn't like today that you can help yourself with this or that, or they can. So they were treating him with hot sand, with bags of hot sand, because it was war. The medication, all the medicaments and everything was going to elsewhere. So even if they had anything, not there. And he was hospitalized, and for quite a while, and they were treating him that way. So that man was broken from then on. He was not the same person anymore from point of view of his character. That he was occupied by these people whom he distrusted, hated, and so on, and had to work for them, because without work you had to, and so on. So from that point, psychologically and mentally, he was very low.
Did he ever talk to you
Not
or
to
your
me,
mom
look.
about what?
Of course, yes, with my mother, yes, not with me. Look, you must remember that I was 9 years of age then.
Yes, but you were an
but all
inquisitive
the
child,
same,
so you would have asked questions, I'm sure.
Yes, but it was so sad for me to see him. I wouldn't have asked him. What would I ask? How do you feel? I mean, what would I ask him?
No, what happened?
No, what happened? Yes, I knew what happened. He was on the front and he saw terrible things, and he's not. I knew what happened, but it affected him to such an extent. Like, I don't think it affected many other people that way. It just affected him personally. He felt it so deeply that his nerves gave in, and his nervous system was very bad. But he worked, he had to work, and he was working, and of course he could not work in his profession, because that was not all bourgeois. I mean, you couldn't do that, so he had to invent a profession. So he said he is a carpenter, a cabinet maker. Or did he say carpenter? But then afterwards they thought, and he could do things with his hands. He was very, very, very talented in many aspects, and so he could build a house with his hands, So whatever he did was perfection. So both the Russians and the Germans admired his work, and they both actually said the same things to him. So, you're not a carpenter. What do you mean I'm not a carpenter? Of course I'm a carpenter. It's my profession. That's what I'm doing. No. You're not just a carpenter. Maybe a cabinet man. Yes, I can do things which are perhaps a little more more nicer slightly, but we don't need such things nowadays. So I'm doing what I'm asked to do. If you want me to do something a little better, I'll do it.